Good morning, I'm J. Lenora Bressler, and welcome to the December 28, 2019 edition of the Bible Delight in the Details. This is the second in a special three-part series on some of the overlooked details of Christmas. On Christmas Eve, we talked about Bethlehem and why Bethlehem, and today we're going to be talking about the Magi. You may have noticed that I am in a moving car, and that's kind of appropriate, isn't it, to talk about the Magi, given that they were traveling, and that's what they're known for, is traveling from the east from afar. Now, the story of the Magi is comes to us from the Gospel of Matthew, and there are a lot of misconceptions. First of all, the Magi means wise men, but the Magi is a term of art. There were different Magi all throughout the Middle East during this time. And they were, in some ways, almost more powerful sometimes than kings themselves, because kings of the region would call on these Magi, ask them to come to them and advise them. So they were truly wise, and not just wise in one religion or one geopolitical system. They really contained within themselves the entirety, if you will, of human knowledge. Very, very wise. But there were different Magi. So the first question is, which Magi are we talking about? Who exactly came to the birth of Christ? Well, there are basically three groups that would have been the most prominent. The first were the Babylonian Magi, and they were by far the most well-known, the oldest, and we'll get back to them because I believe that it's pretty clear that that's who these were. But there were also Magi from the Saudi Arabia area and also from the Pythian Empire. Some people like to say that it was possibly the Pythians because it does say that when they arrived in Jerusalem, Herod and all of Jerusalem was very frightened because of them. And that makes people think, well, the Pythians were really the Roman opposition at this time. The Romans could never conquer the Pythians, and so if indeed they were coming from the Pythian Empire, which was to the east of the boundaries of the Roman Empire, that would have been very frightening. But then again, Herod was such a paranoid dude anyway that anything frightened him, so I don't think that we can really base it on that. The reason I personally think that it was the Babylonians is because of the way God dealt with them. If you remember, they came because they saw the star, and then later, when Herod had the horrible plan to use them to lead him directly to the Messiah, so he could kill the child, I should say. God warned them in a dream. So we have wise men being associated closely with stars and dreams. That's how God dealt with them, how he communicated with them. And the Babylonian Magi, more than any else of the other types, that was what they were renowned for. They were great astronomers, and they were very well known for their dream interpretations. So it seems appropriate that God would use those things in dealing with them. Now, we know that it was prophesied that kings would come to the dawning of your rising. That was the prophetic language in this in the scriptures. So we know that there would be non-Jewish, Gentile people that would celebrate and acknowledge the birth of the Messiah. But how did these Magi even know about all this? Well, if indeed, as I believe, these were the Babylonian Magi, they knew because one of the most renowned chief Magi was actually Jewish. Yes. Do you remember Daniel, as in Daniel in the lion's den? Well, what you may not remember about him is that when he when he interpreted the dream of King Nebuchadnezzar that none of the other magi could do, the king was going to kill all of the magi because they could not do what frankly was an impossible task, which was not only interpret his dream, but they had to tell him what the dream even was. Well, no one could do that unless God gave them that insight. Daniel, who was on the staff at that time, he was an advisor to King Nebuchadnezzar. He ran to the steward and said, "Tell the king not to kill the magi. I have been given the dream and its interpretation by the Lord." At least on 2 occasions, Nebuchadnezzar indicated that Daniel and Daniel's God was to be revered in Babylon, and he was made chief magi, a position he held through 3 different kingdoms, actually. As you know, the Babylonians fell to the Medes and Persians, who then later fell as well. And Daniel kept his position through all 3 of those regime changes. So he was a chief magi for many, many years. He would have brought into the Magi's collection of knowledge not only his prophetic writings, which we have, but anything that was prior to that. So all the messianic prophecies of Isaiah and Ezekiel and others would have been in their collection. And because of his highly esteemed position, they would have paid attention to that and kept that understanding alive. Now, in Daniel, Daniel writes, he prophesies exactly when the Messiah is going to be born. And he counts from the time of the decree that allowed the Jews to go back to their homeland. And so the Magi would have known exactly when to be on the lookout for confirmation in the heavens that the Messiah was being born. A lot of times people want to know, what exactly did the Magi understand about Jesus Christ? Well, again, the Bible is pretty clear on that. First of all, it says that the Magi, when they found the baby, that they bowed down and worshiped him. Now, a couple things. First of all, the Magi didn't bow down to hardly anybody, so they were usually the ones being bowed down to. So the fact that they bowed down is very important. And also the term worshipped. Again, these are people that are not easily cowed or easily impressed by authority. They were usually being brought in because that authority knew they needed help. And so the fact that they would not only bow but worship, bow and worship, shows that they understood they were dealing with somebody very special. Also, what exactly did they say to Herod? They asked him, "Where is he born King of the Jews?" Now, at that moment, that was a bold thing for them to say to Herod, because he was technically king at that time. So you would have thought that at the most they would have said, "Where is he born who will be King of the Jews?" at a later point. But no, they seem to understand that regardless of whether he was being acknowledged that way or not at the moment, he was indeed born King of the Jews. But yes, there is more. Excuse me. So, the next thing is, what did they bring to baby Jesus? Well, we're told they brought gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Now, why those 3 things? Well, if you were a wise man and you wanted to go and honor a Messiah who the scriptures that you've been studying is making clear is more than just a man, that he is the Son of God, so he is a deity, and you want to know, well, what should I bring? How do I honor him? What would you do? You would search the scriptures to see how that God liked to be worshiped. And that would send you to Exodus chapter 30. And that is where God told Moses exactly how he was to be worshiped, how the interior of the tabernacle, later the temple, was to be decorated, and how he was to be worshiped. And if you want to really be amazed, you go and read chapter 30 of Exodus, because what you're going to find is that there are 3 things which are essential for worshiping the Lord in the Old Testament. And they are, yes, you guessed it, gold. Every piece of furniture, every implement, everything that is being used in the worship of God was overlaid in gold. Frankincense was used as as prayers going up. It was placed on the altar, and so as sacrifices were being made, that beautiful aroma came up. That frankincense was so holy, so sacred, to be used only for the worship of God, that it was actually illegal. You could be exiled from Israel if you had frankincense in your possession for anything other than religious purposes. So if these magi had not understood that they were bringing something to God himself, they would have been setting up the family for an offense that could have gotten them exiled, if not absolutely killed. And then myrrh, you will find in Exodus 30 that myrrh was a incense that was doused. Everything was doused with it. It was to set aside the furniture, the implements, even the priest's clothing for the sacred work that they were doing. And so these would have been the perfect gifts for the perfect worship of the Jewish God. And so we know that the Magi understood full well who they were dealing with. They were dealing with the Holy God of Israel, in the form of this tiny baby. It's a beautiful thing to know that Gentiles, people that were true seekers, who applied their understanding and were guided by the Holy Spirit, had a part in the first Christmas. I'm J. Lenore Bressler. Have a great day.